upset because she didn't have to die. She didn't have to die. I'm upset because it could have been me.
This man needs to be off the street, and I pray that God convict him that he will turn himself in, because the streets is mad at what I'm hearing.
In the early hours of September 12, 2021, a heavily pregnant woman would be shot dead moments after her baby shower. At around 1 a.m., just a few moments, 31-year-old pregnant Shanice Young, who had just returned home from celebrating her own baby shower with family and friends, she was glowing with excitement, eagerly anticipating the arrival of her baby. What she didn't know was that it would be the last celebration she would ever have. At around 1 a.m., the New York City Police Department responded to a 911 call about a shooting just outside an apartment building at 300 W 128th Street, Harlem. Nothing could have prepared them for the horrifying scene they were about to encounter. When police arrived at the scene, they found Shanice's body lying in the street, just outside the entrance to her apartment building. She had been shot in the head at point-blank range. Sadly, this isn't the first time we've had to tell a story like this. Think back to Misha Johnson, a gentle soul with dreams of love and happiness. Her life was taken by the very man she trusted most. She was 6 months pregnant when she would be killed and dismembered by husband after she caught him. If you haven't watched that one yet, I'll link it at the end. It's a heartbreaking echo. Now let's look at the tragic life and death of Shanice Young.
My daughter was the beautiful woman in the world. She stepped up when her mother died, took care of her little sister and her brother.
Shanice Young, born on March 17, 1990 in Harlem, New York, was a loving mother, daughter, sister, and friend. At 31, she was 8.5 months pregnant with her third child, already the proud mother of 2 daughters, ages 6 and 8. Despite the challenges she faced, Shanice was fiercely committed to providing a better life for her family. After her mother passed away from ovarian cancer a year earlier, Shanice took on the responsibility of caring for her younger siblings, a role she embraced with unwavering devotion. But Shanice hoped for a fresh start, seeking peace and stability for her growing family. Shanice had recently moved into an apartment building on West 128th Street, hoping for a fresh start in a new community. She was excited about the future and the possibilities it held for her children and her growing family. Shanice's friends and family knew her as someone who always went above and beyond to make sure others were taken care of. Whether it was helping a neighbor with groceries, offering a warm meal, or just lending an ear, she was a constant source of support. Shanice worked hard to provide for her children and give them the best life possible. She was known for her warm and generous spirit, and people in the community often spoke of her selflessness and ability to make everyone feel special. Despite her many responsibilities, Shanice never lost sight of the importance of family and community. Yet despite her strong resolve and dedication, Shanice was trapped in a relationship that threatened to tear apart the stability she had worked so hard to build. Shanice's relationship with her ex, Justin Serrano, cast a long shadow over her life. Though they had 2 children together, the relationship was filled with emotional and physical abuse. Justin's infidelity and toxic behavior led to their separation, but he was relentless in his attempts to control Shanice's life. She had filed for orders of protection against him 3 times, but Justin refused to let go. His obsession with Shanice grew, and he would often appear uninvited at her home or work, creating chaos and fear in her life. Shanice's resolve to protect her children and herself only strengthened during this time, but it was clear that Justin's behavior was escalating. As the tension grew, Shanice was trapped in a dangerous situation with nowhere to hide. Her ability to stay strong and push through the pain of an abusive relationship The loss of her mother and the pressures of raising 2 children while expecting a third made Shanice an inspiration to those around her. However, despite her strength, her world was about to come crashing down in the most tragic and unimaginable way. In the early hours of September 12, 2021, Shanice, who was 8.5 months pregnant, had just celebrated her baby shower with her family and friends. She was glowing with excitement, eagerly anticipating the arrival of her baby. The evening was filled with laughter, joy, and love, as Shanice looked forward to starting the next chapter of her life. But what should have been one of the happiest moments of her life soon turned into a nightmare. At around 1 a.m., Shanice and her current boyfriend, the father of her unborn child and her 2 children, returned to their apartment building, unloading presents from the baby shower. It was a beautiful moment, yet one that would soon be shattered. What she didn't know was that her troubled past was lurking just outside her door. Justin Serrano, her abusive ex-boyfriend, had been waiting for the perfect moment to confront her, and that moment arrived when she least expected it. Justin, filled with anger and resentment, appeared on the scene confronting Shanice and her new boyfriend. He had been watching from a distance, plotting his next move. Tensions quickly escalated as Justin's confrontation with Shanice's new boyfriend turned physical. Words were exchanged, insults thrown, and soon a violent argument broke out. Shanice, trying desperately to keep the peace, stood between the 2 men, hoping to defuse the situation. Shanice asked Justin what he was doing there, her voice filled with both fear and frustration, attempting to calm the storm. But Justin, already consumed by rage, had no interest in peace. In an instant, he pulled out a gun and, with a cold and calculated fury, shot Shanice in the head at point-blank range. The horror of the moment was made even worse by the presence of Shanice's 2 young children who were waiting in the car. They were innocent witnesses to the unfathomable violence that unfolded before them, their lives forever changed in that terrifying instant. Shanice's current boyfriend, desperate to stop Justin, chased him into the building, but when he returned to the scene moments later, it was too late. Shanice lay motionless on the ground, her life quickly slipping away. The baby she had been so excited to welcome into the world died along with her. Shanice was rushed to Harlem Hospital, but despite the valiant efforts of the medical staff, she could not be saved. The news of Shanice's tragic death quickly spread through the community, leaving those who knew her in disbelief. Shanice had been a beloved figure, known for her kindness, generosity, and devotion to her children. She had endured so much in her life, including an abusive relationship with Justin, but she had always found strength to move forward for the sake of her family.
Good evening, I'm Joe Torres. Sandra has the night off. We begin with a tragic story in Harlem. A mother celebrating her baby shower in the head while trying to break up a fight. It happened early this morning at West 128th Street and Frederick Douglass Boulevard. A makeshift memorial has now been set up to mourn 31-year-old Shanice Young. Eyewitness News reporter Naveen Dhaliwal joins us from the scene. Naveen.
Yeah, Joe, this is so disheartening. The happened right here in front of her building, the memorial right there. You can see neighbors have been coming by today, putting candles and flowers in front of the building where 31-year-old Shanice Young was hit in the head. Now, we have learned that she was coming back from her baby shower, taking gifts from her car into the lobby, and that's when 2 men began to fight, and she was trying to break that fight. Now, neighbors tell us that one of the men was Shanice's ex and the other was the father of her unborn child. Now, at some point, detectives say a gun went off, striking the 31-year-old in the head. She was rushed to the hospital, and that's where she passed away. Now, she was 8 months pregnant. Sources say her unborn child also didn't make it, and this tonight is causing an uproar in the Harlem community.
I'm upset because she didn't have to die. She didn't have to die. I'm upset because it could have been me.
It could have been me. And in fact, it's people we know, people we love. There's a child that couldn't even enter into the world because of what's going on.
And also right now, we're learning that Shanice had a 6-year-old daughter as well as an 11-year-old sister who she was taking care of because of their mother had passed away about 2 years ago. As far as that, police say, still on the run.
The community, devastated by her loss, was left grappling with the senseless violence that took her life and the life of her unborn child. Shanice had worked so hard to build a future for her children and dreamed of a brighter future for her family, but her life was tragically cut short by the man who had once claimed to love her. Her death was not just a personal loss for her family, but a heartbreak felt deeply by the entire Harlem community. But little did anyone know this was only the beginning of a long fight for justice.
The search is on for the gunman who shot and killed a pregnant mother as she headed home from her own baby shower this morning in Harlem. Eyewitness News reporter Naveen Dhaliwal spoke to the victim's grieving family.
A celebration turned into heartbreak for a Harlem family. The pain was visible.
She was 9 months pregnant.
Shanice Young, a mother just weeks away from giving birth, was shot in the head in front of her building on West 128th Street.
Shanice was a victim. Shanice did not have 4 children. Shanice had 2 daughters, and the third one died with her.
Just after 1 a.m., Shanice was returning from her baby shower. She was taking the gifts into her building lobby when police say a fight broke out between 2 men. Neighbors say one of the men was Shanice's ex, the other the father of her unborn child. One of them had a gun that fired off.
I was woken up because of the shots.
A bullet hit Shanice in the head.
As you could imagine, it was very tense and emotional last night. I don't think anybody was able to walk around here without crying.
And so many wondering the same thing.
It's scary, and it's a little close to home. And who's a pregnant woman in front of her kids?
And this message for the
This man needs to be off the street, and I pray that God convict him, that he would turn himself in, because the streets is mad at what I'm hearing.
Tonight, police are still trying to determine who pulled that trigger. The still on the run.
After the devastating loss of Shanice Young, the search for justice began. The police were quick to respond to the scene of the shooting, and the investigation into the senseless killing of a mother and her unborn child was underway. But the deeper the investigators dug, the more they uncovered about the person closest to her. When police arrived at the scene, they found Shanice's body lying in the street, just outside the entrance to her apartment building. Her current boyfriend was understandably distraught, but his focus was on the fact that Justin Soriano, Shanice's ex, was nowhere to be found. Witnesses, however, soon began to reveal the truth. Witnesses in the building had seen Justin confront Shanice and her new boyfriend, and it didn't take long for investigators to realize that Justin was the primary suspect in the shooting. As the investigation intensified, the pieces of Justin's violent history began to emerge. As they canvassed the area, police learned that Justin Soriano had a violent history. He had been arrested 17 times, many of those charges related to assault, stalking, and harassment. Despite his history, Justin had managed to avoid significant consequences, leaving Shanice in constant fear for her safety. This history would prove to be a critical factor in building the case against him. The most troubling part of this entire case was the fact that Shanice had been granted 3 orders of protection against Justin, yet he had shown no signs of relenting. In fact, he had continued to stalk her, showing up at her apartment and causing chaos in her life even after their relationship had ended. The police quickly confirmed that Justin had been in the vicinity when Shanice was shot. The timeline fit, and it became apparent that Justin had followed Shanice home after the baby shower, lying in wait for the right moment to strike. With mounting evidence, investigators were now ready to make an arrest. With no sign of Justin and no leads as to where he had gone, the police launched a full-scale manhunt. Posters were put up all over Harlem, alerting the public to the fact that the 40-year-old ex-boyfriend was wanted for the murder of Shanice Young and her unborn child. The community rallied behind Shanice's family, showing their support with a growing memorial outside the apartment building where she had been gunned down. Flowers, candles, and photos of Shanice began to accumulate, creating a somber reminder of the life lost to violence. People who knew her described her as the kind of person who would give anything to help others, and they couldn't fathom why anyone would want to hurt her. While the community mourned Shanice's loss, the police continued to search for Justin, hoping for any tip that would lead to his whereabouts. And then, just when it seemed like the trail had gone cold, a breakthrough came. It was Thursday afternoon when the police finally caught their break. Justin Soriano was apprehended in a quiet neighborhood in the Bronx. He was found walking on a street, emotionless and seemingly unbothered by his arrest. The detectives had managed to track Justin to a location based on tips and surveillance footage from the area. When they confronted him, he didn't resist. Instead, he was arrested without incident. As the handcuffed Justin was escorted into the NYPD's 32nd Precinct in Harlem, emotions ran high. For Shanice's family and the community, this moment was bittersweet. The relief of knowing that the man responsible for Shanice's death was now in custody was tempered by the realization that nothing would bring her back. Justin Soriano faced multiple charges, including second-degree murder, menacing, and acting in a manner injurious to a child. The charges related to the unborn child were particularly poignant, as Shanice's baby had been just days away from being born when the violent act occurred.
It took several days to bring this suspect into custody, and now the victim's family, they're wondering what could have been done to prevent this tragedy. An uneventful, emotionless walk of a handcuffed 40-year-old Justin Soriano, escorted by two detectives Thursday evening from the NYPD's 32nd Precinct Station House in Harlem. His arrest on murder charges, signaling a moment of relief for his victim's family. Soriano stands accused of his pregnant ex-girlfriend, 31-year-old Shanice Young, in the head last Sunday as she returned home from her baby shower. She was 8.5 months pregnant.
I don't want him to see the light of day, you know.
At the time of the shooting, investigators say Young was trying to break up a fight between her ex-boyfriend, Soriano, and her current boyfriend, who was also the father of her unborn baby. It's unclear if the pregnant mother was the intended target, but for her father, Thurman Thomas, it really does not matter.
A person that do that ain't got no heart. They got no feelings. So
Soriano spent 4 days on the run before his arrest Thursday. Stephanie McGraw, founder of the domestic violence victim advocacy organization WARM.
What we need to do is create a policy for 3 strikes you're out domestic violence defenders registry so they can be tracked, because this guy had a serious track record of domestic violence.
The scene is also just 2 doors down from the headquarters of Harlem Mothers Save, the longtime anti-violence organization founded by Jackie Rowe Adams, who lost not 1, but 2 sons to gun violence.
Legislation has not been fully passed to stop this gun traffic and all these illegal guns coming into our community, getting into the hands of the wrong people.
The issues raised by both Ms. McGraw and Ms. Rowe Adams remain a critical step on the path towards progress in this community. But for Thurman Thomas, a father in mourning, there is only one thing that matters at this moment: keeping his daughter's memory alive.
my daughter was beautiful, man. She was just the type of person that would take care of everybody. So that's what I remember about her, man. She was just giving, you know.
Mr. Thomas and the family are still in the midst of making funeral arrangements for Shanice. We're live in Harlem tonight. Jay Dow, Pix 11 News.
As news of Justin Soriano's arrest spread, the community came together for a vigil in honor of Shanice. Local leaders, community activists, and elected officials gathered outside the building where Shanice had been gunned down to offer their condolences and support for the young family. The vigil also highlighted the devastating impact of domestic violence, with speakers urging the community to take action against abuse and to support victims in need of help. The director of an anti-domestic violence organization, We All Really Matter, joined the vigil and spoke passionately about the importance of recognizing the signs of domestic abuse and intervening before it's too late.
If you're in suffering, if you're in an abusive relationship, if you are in a relationship that's not healthy, get out. Shanice didn't get out. She was 8 months pregnant, and she was by her ex-boyfriend. Understand that you're in danger when you are trying to get out of an abusive relationship. Ask for help. We're here to help you. 646-488-0338. Our Instagram page, Norm NYC. You don't have to suffer in silence. We're not going to let Shanice and let her death be in vain. Reach out and ask for help.
Good, Stephanie, that was excellent.
Reach out and ask for help.
That was excellent. I was just going to tell everybody know her family.
This is the father right here.
Stephanie.
Though Justin Soriano had been arrested and charged with the brutal murder of Shanice Young, the pain and grief felt by her family and the community in Harlem would never fade. Shanice's death, along with the death of her unborn child, left a wound in the heart of the neighborhood that would take a long time to heal. For Shanice's family, the journey wasn't over. They were determined to make sure her death would not be in vain and that the fight for justice would continue. As the legal process unfolded, Shanice's loved ones found themselves not only coping with an unimaginable loss, but also becoming fierce advocates for victims of domestic violence. With Justin in custody, the next phase was the legal battle. The community waited anxiously as the trial date was set, hoping for justice to be served. As the case went to court, emotions ran high for Shanice's family, who had to relive the horrific events of that night. As the trial progressed, Shanice's family and the prosecution pushed for the maximum penalty. The charges against Justin included second-degree murder, as well as additional charges related to the unborn child's death. The case drew attention not only because of the brutality of the crime, but also because of the fact that Shanice was a victim of domestic violence who had repeatedly sought legal protection from her abuser. Despite having 3 active orders of protection against him, Justin had ignored the law, continued to stalk her, and ultimately took her life. The prosecution emphasized the dangers of domestic violence and the failure of the system to protect victims despite Shanice's efforts to seek help. Experts testified about the psychological effects of abuse and how, in many cases, victims feel trapped and powerless. After a tense trial, the jury deliberated and Justin Soriano was convicted of second-degree murder for the death of Shanice Young and the murder of her unborn child. The sentencing was scheduled for several weeks later, but the community remained hopeful that justice would finally be served. On the day of sentencing, family and friends packed the courtroom, ready to hear the judge's decision. When the verdict was read, a mixture of emotions swept over Shanice's loved ones: relief, anger, and deep sorrow. Justin Soriano was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. For Shanice's father, the sentence was a small measure of justice, but it would never replace the daughter he had lost. Despite the conviction, the pain of Shanice's death would never fully heal for her family. Thurman continued to speak out on behalf of his daughter, vowing to keep her memory alive and ensure that her death served as a wake-up call to others. Community leaders, including local anti-domestic violence advocates, spoke out about the need for more support for victims of abuse. They highlighted the systemic failures that allowed Justin Soriano to continue stalking Shanice despite her attempts to seek protection. Shanice's story became a rallying cry for those working to end domestic violence.
The stillness of mid-June 2020 shattered in a quiet Memphis neighborhood when gunshots rang out inside a home on Quinn Avenue, and a pregnant woman dropped dead in her home. This was 19-year-old Jamisha Kovson, a beloved daughter, treasured friend, and expecting mother. That night marked the end for her at the hands of a man she once loved.
We asked her to leave. We begged her to leave.
Everyone had seen the demon in her baby's father. It just took Jamisha a longer time. But when she did, she had discovered a dark secret that could end his life and freedom. So, he decided to end hers first. With 911 calls flooding into the police department, the cops quickly set out to the location of the shots fired. But they were too late, as the blooming mother had bled out on the floor, left to die. With her killer nowhere to be found, the cops were instantly on high alert. Their investigation would take them to a man with an intense bloodlust and a complete lack of empathy. To date, his inhumane nature remains with the officers, the judge, and all who encountered him. This is the life and death of Jamisha Kovson. Jamisha's story unfolded in the city of Memphis, Tennessee. This is a culturally rich and diverse city in Tennessee, celebrated for its blues, soul, and barbecue, as well as landmarks like Beale Street and the National Civil Rights Museum. The people are resilient, community-oriented, and deeply proud of their heritage. Various neighborhoods reflect the city's strong ties to music, art, and faith. However, by mid-2020, Memphis had one of the highest violent crime rates in the U.S., with a sharp rise in homicides and assaults, a statistic that Jamisha would soon join. Jamisha had grown up surrounded by a caring family who loved her deeply. Friends and relatives painted a picture of a modest young woman with a gentle voice and earnest smile, just beginning to chart a path as a young woman with a good head on her shoulders. She was in a relationship with Joshua Dotson, also from Memphis. It is unclear how they met or came to fall in love, but it is certain that they did fall hard for each other. Like every new love, it was rosy and sweet at first, especially for Jamisha. But everyone around her saw something different, and they tried to warn her. Friends could see very easily how evil and manipulative Joshua was. They saw it in the intense fights and heated arguments the couple had. It was obvious in the threats he threw her way. But even in the midst of such darkness, a blessing came. Jamisha discovered she was pregnant and was completely overjoyed. She had hopes for the future, holding her baby for the first time, continuing to deepen her relationships, and creating a safe home for her small family. But for the first time, she had to think about another person's safety, so she made a decision. By June 2020, Jamisha had made sure that the relationship had ended. It is not exactly sure when or why she ended it, but it is easy to see that she was tired of the toxic situation and wanted out. But it was not so easy to get rid of Joshua. Early on the morning of June 12th, Joshua showed up at Jamisha's house on Quinn Avenue. Accounts from investigators and neighbors say an argument between the former couple erupted from inside the home. It grew tense and violent, all because of Joshua's suspicions. Joshua believed Jamisha knew too much, way too much about him that could put him in trouble. It also suggested that he was pissed about a mysterious Facebook post and even about the baby in her belly. He was all around angry, and his wrath zeroed in on her as his victim. But as Jamisha ran from him and everything, Jamisha retreated into a room and shut the door behind her, seeking distance. But what happened next would change everything. A single gunshot rang out through that closed door. It did not find its mark, but the violence had begun. Joshua forced his way into the room and continued the confrontation. Jamisha was completely scared for her life and at his mercy. Then, just when she thought it was over, he surprised her. Joshua suddenly left. For a moment, it seemed the scene might calm, but just when hope for peace lingered, Joshua returned, and he was more determined this time. Moments later, several gunshots were unleashed through the door again, multiple bullets tearing through the barrier. Those rounds struck Jamisha, ending not only her life, but the life of her unborn child. As sharp adrenaline faded into icy shock, the house fell silent. Soon enough, screams and panicked phone calls broke that silence. Neighbors reported hearing gunfire. 911 lines rang full. Police rushed to the scene, desperate to make it in time to save a life. But the sight inside was something they could never get used to. Officers forced open the door and found Jamisha inside, bleeding heavily and unresponsive. Paramedics transported her immediately to a nearby hospital, but doctors were unable to save her or the baby she carried. It was certain. Jamisha Kovson and her unborn baby were dead, and the prime suspect would soon be revealed to be the third member of their small family. The investigation swung into motion almost instantly. Crime scene technicians combed the room, recovering bullet casings and documenting damage to door frames and walls. Investigators measured bullet trajectories and blood splatter patterns. Several witnesses testified that they had briefly seen Joshua outside the home, brandishing a firearm with a determined expression. It was only after examining the neighborhood security footage and witness accounts that detectives realized how quickly Joshua had vanished after the shots. He was determined to slip away, but the authorities were just getting started in their manhunt. Within hours, law enforcement issued alerts. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation added him to the most wanted list with a reward of $13,500, marking him as an armed and dangerous man. His image, recognized by distinctive facial tattoos, spread across city bulletins, social media feeds, and statewide alerts. Soon enough, federal authorities stepped in. The U.S. Marshals Gulf Coast Regional Fugitive Task Force joined the search. The fugitive's photo and known vehicle details were shared with every law enforcement agency from Memphis to Nashville. Multiple digital billboards flashed his name with up to $10,000 in rewards. Every agency was notified. Joshua Dotson, missing, possibly violent, to be apprehended immediately.
Man, this shit cool. These folk police in hell cool. I'm still finna get out. I ain't studying this shit. Oh, God.
But detectives hit a wall. Joshua was nowhere to be found. Days passed as detectives followed multiple tips and traced his last known movements. Witness reports narrowed the trail, seen in parking lots, caught on random phone pings, and briefly captured on traffic cameras as they left Memphis. And then, one breakthrough turned the investigation around. On June 18, 6 days after the homicide, a man in Nashville resembling the wanted photo was pulled aside after a routine traffic stop. Confirmatory checks ensued, prints, tattoos, and finally, ballistic matches tied Joshua's weapon to the shell casings recovered in the home. He was immediately taken into custody. At that moment, it seemed like the most violent chapter of Jamisha's story appeared to be over, but the emotional chaos had already begun as his trial was about to start. For her family, there was no real relief. Speaking through tears, her loved ones described a hole left by her absence, one that justice couldn't fill. Her friends agreed that she was not perfect, but she was getting her life together, especially after they warned her to leave him.
She was just getting her life together, but she wasn't perfect. Ain't no way of form fashion we was saying she perfect, but she was getting her together.
To them, even his confession would not bring peace. But the cops were determined to get that justice, and soon, investigators discovered another unsettling truth. As the forensic files were reviewed, information from Joshua's earlier life began to surface. It would soon become clear that Jamisha's murder was not an isolated crime. It was only the beginning. Detectives revisited unsolved murder investigations from 2019 and early 2020, involving 3 other victims, Devion, Renita, and Reginald, all shot in Memphis under eerily similar circumstances. Each case displayed patterns that prompted authorities to connect them to Joshua. Eventually, Joshua himself would confess. But for now, relief spread through the force. Right at that moment, Joshua's capture in Nashville marked a turning point. He was himself a fugitive on the FBI's top 10 list, apprehended just 6 days after Jamisha's killing. He was taken into custody and held without bond, initially charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder for Jamisha and her unborn child. The charges rapidly expanded as prosecuting teams added the earlier killings to their indictment strategy. As he remained behind bars, news of his arrest sent shockwaves through Memphis. Jamisha's family mourned deeply. Close friends and relatives described her as a devoted and hopeful young woman with dreams of future. At local memorials, mourners lit candles and left flowers, using vigils to raise awareness around the dangers of domestic violence and emotional manipulation. As fall 2024 approached, the trial for Jamisha's case began in earnest. But even as the proceedings went on in court, Joshua's behavior left the world in shock and helped the prosecution. Prosecutors presented a compelling sequence: forensic evidence, eyewitness testimony, surveillance footage, backed by Joshua's own social media references. They painted a narrative that the events on Quinn Avenue were not isolated, but part of a broader pattern. Then came a moment that stunned the courtroom. Joshua took the stand in his own defense. Rather than expressing regret, he admitted to being a serial killer and compared himself to Michael Myers. He even admitted responsibility for the earlier murders of Divion, Renita, and Reginald. This instantly reshaped how the prosecution approached the evidence and destroyed defense's case. Despite the defense team's framing of these admissions as bravado or a mental breakdown, the jury found the admissions compelling.
Also new this midday, a Shelby County jury found a man guilty for killing his girlfriend and unborn child. That jury convicted Joshua Dotson after a 3-day trial. Police say that Dotson shot and killed Jamisha Cufson and her unborn child at Cufson's South Memphis home in 2020. Dotson will be sentenced in the coming weeks. He now faces the possibility of life in prison without parole.
In August 2024, after a lengthy deliberation, the jury delivered their verdict. It was guilty verdicts on both counts of first-degree murder, one for Jamisha, the other for her unborn child. A hush fell over the courtroom. For Jamisha's family, the verdict brought relief, but also deep sorrow. For the community, it was a confirmation that calculated, premeditated violence would not be left unpunished. Community advocates, already shaken when Joshua himself proclaimed in court that he was a serial killer and compared himself to Michael Myers, demanded that the cases of Divion, Renita, and Reginald receive equal priority. They called for a special task force to ensure justice was delivered, not just for Jamisha, but for all victims linked to Joshua. Meanwhile, conversations began to swirl on social media and in local news coverage about a possible tie to another notorious figure, Jesse Dotson. Jesse was sentenced to death in 2008 after killing 6 people in a single night in Memphis, including his own brother and 2 children, leaving 3 young survivors whose testimony was critical at trial. Suddenly, Joshua faced speculation that he might be Jesse's nephew. Though no official link was ever confirmed, the theory added an unsettling layer to his profile and captured the public's attention, fueling broader questions about violence repeating within families. Meanwhile, the court prepared to deliver a heavy sentence on Joshua. The judge, reviewing the record, noted Joshua's chilling demeanor. He hadn't shown remorse during trial, even falling asleep in court at times. His courtroom identification as a serial killer and the breadth of his admissions convinced her that consecutive sentences were needed.
He is a serial killer. He's Michael Myers, remember? That's what he told me. In 20 years of practice, I've never seen anything this thorough, detailed, describing the criminal, sadistic behaviors you've exhibited, not only in jail, but towards staff with shanks and ice picks and sexually inexcusable behaviors, assaultive behaviors, constant. He wanted to speak, and he said that from day one, and we let him. He told his story. Unfortunately, his story is a story of wreaking absolute havoc on this community.
Now, it's at this point that the court had to consider Joshua's past. His criminal record traced back to when he was just 14. The judge cited his violent history, as well as his testimony where he showed no remorse, to justify the maximum sentence. She ruled the 2 life terms would run consecutively, not concurrently. because in her words, no lesser punishment would reflect the depth of harm inflicted. In October 2024, Joshua received a sentence totaling 102 years, 2 consecutive 51-year terms for Jamisha and her unborn child.
New at 4:30, a self-proclaimed serial killer will be spending the rest of his life in prison. Today, Joshua Dotson was sentenced to more than 100 years for the murder of his former girlfriend and her unborn child.
Dotson still has other assault and murder cases pending in our courts. He was immediately turned over to the Tennessee Department of Corrections to begin his sentence.
But then, the case entered another phase. District attorneys made it clear that additional indictments were forthcoming for Divion, Renita, and Reginald. Those trials would rely heavily on Joshua's own statements and the previously collected forensic evidence, offering hope to the family still awaiting justice. At the same time, neighborhood-based groups harnessed Jamisha's case to press for reforms in domestic violence prevention, mental health interventions, and prison release oversight. They argued that earlier signals, especially Joshua's violent history, should have triggered more decisive action long before tragedy struck. As Memphis prepared for the next series of trials, the families of all 5 victims watched closely, determined that justice be comprehensive and complete. Their resolve was fueled by heartbreak, but also by a shared belief that accountability could bring closure and possibly prevent future tragedies. Joshua's story, his brutal acts, self-proclaimed identity, courtroom admissions, and rumored link to Jesse has left an indelible scar on the city. Through it all, the community has banded together to mourn, support victims' families, and demand systemic accountability. However, the story didn't end in Jamisha's case. Less than 4 months later, in February 2025, the case took another dramatic turn. Joshua appeared in court again and entered guilty pleas in 3 additional murders: Divion Parker in 2019, and both Renita Bennett and Reginald Anderson in May 2020. This time, prosecutors secured a 159-year sentence, which would be added to his existing 102-year term. That brought the total to 261 years, ensuring that Joshua would never again walk free. As the sentence was read aloud, prosecutors emphasized that this wasn't just about punishing a man, but about protecting a community he had terrorized. And ever since then, officials have stood by the sentence as a symbol of unflinching accountability. Still, even this measure of justice couldn't fully repair what has been lost. In Memphis and beyond, people continue to grapple with the enormity of the tragedy. Advocacy groups issued statements of solidarity, urging renewed attention to domestic violence and the silent dangers many women face while trying to escape. Meanwhile, the community sought ways to honor Jamisha's memory. Her funeral had taken place in late October, not long after the original verdict. Friends and family gathered to say goodbye to the young woman they had loved so fiercely. Her sister described her as nurturing, loyal, and full of hope for her future. She was just 19 years old when she died, 5 months pregnant, and already raising a young child. But just when it seemed like the shock was beginning to fade, questions lingered. Could this have been prevented? Did the system fail Jamisha by releasing Joshua after his juvenile sentence? Should there be stricter monitoring of violent offenders who re-enter the community? These questions don't have easy answers, but they matter, because every life lost to domestic violence is one too many. So,
I will never get over somebody doing this to my niece.
Oh Lord, I look 6 months too. Girl, what you supposed to look? 2? Oh Lord, I'm finna get off here. I told Kira.
On June 29, 2020, Fort Worth police made a chilling discovery. The body of 26-year-old Dariani Burley, 6 months pregnant with twins, abandoned in Mansfield, Texas. She'd been shot execution-style in the back of the head. Not long before this, she had been celebrating life, a young mother-to-be who had recently held a gender reveal party surrounded by family and friends, glowing with the promise of raising her twin boys. The man behind her final moments was someone she trusted most, her longtime partner, Maurice Smith. But the deeper investigators dug, the clearer it became that this was no sudden snap of anger. What they uncovered was darker than anyone expected. This is the life and death of Dariani Burley.
Got it. You get whatever it is I need. Say, little butt. Say, little butt.
What, boy?
Say, little butt.
Fort Worth, often called Cowtown, is a city rich in history and culture. Known for its cattle drives and Western heritage, it has the charm of tradition, but also the struggles of modern urban life. Crime and violence shadow its streets as much as prosperity and opportunity shape them. For Dariani, who was born and raised there on July 14, 1993, Fort Worth was home, the place where her dreams of motherhood began, and where they would also come to a tragic end. Dariani Sherelle Burley was born on July 14, 1993, in Fort Worth, Texas, to Olga King Burley and Darrell Burley. She was the fourth of 6 children in a large, close-knit family, and she carried herself with warmth and determination, always striving to make her parents and siblings proud. Friends remembered her as someone with simple hopes, but an extraordinary heart. A young woman who wanted nothing more than to build a better future for herself and those she loved. Education was part of that path. After finishing school in Fort Worth, she went on to attend Connor State College in Muskogee, Oklahoma, where she earned her associate's degree. School and work were stepping stones in her journey, and she poured effort into both. She had ambitions of creating stability, of building something lasting, and she believed she was on the path to do just that. It seemed she was headed toward a bright and steady future, determined to carve out something good for herself. But everything would change when she crossed paths with a man whose presence would alter the course of her life forever. That man was the 32-year-old Maurice Smith, and their relationship quickly became a defining part of her adult life. Their bond stretched over years and carried both moments of joy and painful lows. They had met in high school, and ever since they had been in an on-off relationship. Despite the clear toxicity of their relationship, Dariani clung to the love she believed existed and to the promise of a future she hoped they could build together. But there was one problem. Dariani wasn't just stuck in an on and off relationship. She was also involved with a dangerous man. Maurice Smith's past carried shadows of crime and violence that she could not yet see. Years earlier, he had been convicted of burglary of a habitation in 2017, and then again in 2019 for unlawful possession of a firearm. These convictions revealed a pattern, a glimpse into the kind of danger that quietly followed him. But it doesn't end there. He also had a history of drug abuse, something that would only worsen his violent tendency. Dariani's family and friends saw only the surface, the smiles, the celebrations, the image of a young couple preparing for twins.
I hate these fucking twist-on earrings. Me too. At least you know they're real. Hi, King. Babe. Hi, King. I need you. Let me see your lip gloss. Oh, let me get this glue. Hi, Girl, you was extra. She's so goddamn extra. Why did she do that? Hey,
But behind that mask was a man whose life had already been marred by crime. What Dariani did not realize was that she was stepping deeper into the orbit of someone with a history of reckless choices and violent tendencies. And it was only a matter of time before that history caught up with them both. Despite these shadows, Dariani held on to her relationship with Maurice. To her, there were still moments of laughter, companionship, and hope, glimpses of the future she wanted to believe in. Their connection was complicated, marked by breakups and reconciliations, but it eventually brought them to a point that should have been a beautiful celebration. Dariani got pregnant with twins. When she discovered she was pregnant with twins, the news felt like a new beginning, a chance to put the struggles of the past behind them and focus on building a family. The pregnancy brought a sense of renewal, a hope that perhaps things could truly change for the better. That sense of hope came alive during the gender reveal party in May 2020. Family and friends gathered as the couple learned they were having 2 boys. Photos and videos from that day captured Dariani glowing with happiness, joking about her growing belly and sharing her excitement online. It seemed, at least in that moment, that love and promise had overcome all the darkness that had come before. She dreamed of raising her sons in love, often writing about how she wanted them to grow up without knowing struggle or pain. For those who saw her then, Dariani seemed unstoppable. But behind the celebrations, not everything was as perfect as it appeared. Maurice's past did not remain in the past. His violent tendencies lingered, quietly woven into his nature. To outsiders, he seemed like the excited father-to-be, smiling at gatherings and standing proudly beside Dariani. But beneath that mask, the darker side of him was beginning to stir again, restless and dangerous. By early June of 2020, those shadows broke through the surface. Maurice assaulted Dariani while she was carrying their babies, an act that left scars not easily seen, but deeply felt. It was a glimpse into the turmoil that had always followed him, and a warning of what was still to come. The hope of new life was colliding with the weight of his past. The man who had celebrated with Dariani now showed the side of himself that could not be contained, a side that would bring devastating consequences. The stage was being set, quietly but steadily, for everything to fall apart.
Who pretty? Where?
Don't joke with me. With you, joke with you. Goddamn me, live life, baby.
Don't start.
And on the morning of June 29, 2020, the unthinkable happened. That day began like any other day in Fort Worth. For Dariani, 6 months pregnant with twins, her focus should have been on the small movements in her belly, on the plans for her future, on the excitement of meeting her boys. But instead, the day would end with her life and theirs, cut short in an act of violence so senseless it would send shockwaves through her family and community. That morning, Dariani and Maurice Smith went about what seemed like a normal routine. They stopped at a Waffle House in Fort Worth, grabbing a late-night meal together. To outsiders, nothing appeared unusual. But beneath the surface, tension was building. Their relationship, already strained, had begun to collapse under the weight of Maurice's drug use, violent tendencies, and deepening instability. What should have been a quiet, ordinary meal became the beginning of a tragedy. As they left the restaurant, events took a horrifying turn. Maurice had recently acquired a firearm with the help of a friend, since as a convicted felon, he was barred from purchasing one himself. That weapon was now in his possession, as he drove Dariani away from the Waffle House. Somewhere between the parking lot and the road ahead, a decision was made, one that would forever alter the lives of everyone who loved her. Without warning, Maurice pulled the gun and fired. The bullet struck Dariani in the back of her head, ending not only her life, but also the lives of the twin boys she carried. In an instant, the promise of a young mother's future was gone, extinguished by the very man she trusted most.
Mansfield now. Police there say that they have arrested a man who shot and killed his girlfriend, who was pregnant with twins. This all happened on Monday, we're told, after her body was found in a vehicle along Highway 287. 28-year-old Maurice Smith is now facing a capital murder charge, along with separate aggravated robbery as well as burglary charges.
But Maurice's cruelty did not stop there. With Dariani's lifeless body in the car, he drove to Mansfield, Texas. instead of seeking help, instead of facing what he had done, he committed yet another crime. There he robbed a woman at gunpoint, adding another layer of violence to an already unthinkable act. Only then did he abandon Dariani's body in Mansfield, leaving her behind as though she was disposable. The horror deepened as Maurice tried to erase his tracks. He switched vehicles, attempting to conceal evidence. Back at his residence, detectives would later find him frantically destroying clothing and other items linked to the murder. Yet no matter how desperate his efforts, the truth could not be hidden. Blood-stained clothes and the murder weapon tied him directly to the crime. By the time law enforcement closed in, Maurice's behavior spiraled further into deception. When confronted with the weight of what he had done, he pretended to suffer from memory loss, claiming intoxication and disorientation. Authorities, cautious of the possibility of overdose, transported him to a hospital for evaluation, but there his charade unraveled. Doctors quickly determined he was faking his symptoms, a ploy to stall and manipulate. Even in the hospital, Maurice's actions revealed his state of mind. Handcuffed to the bed, he tried to pick the lock and escape. His every move reflected not remorse, but a desperate attempt to evade responsibility. For Dariani's family, the news was devastating. In the span of a single morning, they lost a daughter, a sister, and the unborn children they had eagerly awaited. The shock was unbearable, the cruelty unimaginable. Their grief was compounded by the knowledge that this wasn't a random act of violence. It came from the very person who was supposed to love and protect her. The investigation left no doubt. Maurice Smith was arrested and charged with capital murder.
Why'd she call you that this morning like that? What started that?
I was smoking, I came to.
This morning before then, huh? Even before you went to your sister's then, right?
Yeah, I was smoking.
Okay.
So when I got out of the car, man, finished off my stick, across the freeway, smoking my stick.
And we want to talk to you about what happened, why you was in Mansfield today. The reason why I'm asking because you definitely talked to a woman today who saw you in Mansfield.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we're trying to figure out what happened in Mansfield. You having some car problems. You had a fight with your girlfriend, your spouse, I'm sorry. So I'm trying to figure out what happened here in Mansfield, what's going on here in Mansfield.
I'm trying to figure out too.
And yet this was only the beginning of the fight for justice. The road ahead would be long, marked by painful testimony and haunting reminders of what had been taken from them. When the case went to trial, Maurice's dark history resurfaced. His prior convictions, burglary of a habitation in 2017 and unlawful possession of a firearm in 2019, revealed a man already steeped in crime. Prosecutors showed how his drug abuse and his assaults against Darian formed a dangerous pattern leading directly to the murder. In court, Maurice tried to claim that Darian had insulted him by calling him a junkie during an argument, insisting he did not kill her. But his defense could not stand against the overwhelming evidence. Witnesses, forensic proof, and his own actions before and after the crime left no doubt in the minds of the jury. The verdict was swift and decisive.
So all of this extra, I've got a detachment. I've read what's been going on in the newspaper. My daughter has read that to me. So I have a detachment. And I do not support him in this. I'm his mother and he's mine. Whichever way that this goes, I have prepared myself for life without parole, and I have asked God to prepare me for the death penalty. So whichever way that this goes, I will forever bear this.
Wow.
I will forever, my family will forever bear this. So either way this goes, whatever choices were made were choices that both of them had counseling from both sides of the family.
Maurice Smith was convicted of capital murder. The jury sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the community, it was a moment of justice, but for Darian's family, it was a hollow victory. No sentence, no matter how severe, could undo the loss of their daughter, sister, and friend, or the unborn twins whose lives ended before they began. In the courtroom, Darian's family spoke of their grief. They remembered her not as the victim of a brutal crime, but as a vibrant young woman filled with hope. Her mother, siblings, and loved ones described her as someone determined to create a better life for her children, someone whose joy had been stolen in the cruelest way possible. Their words were heavy with sorrow, but also with strength, a reminder that Darion's life mattered and that her story would not be silenced. Her death left a mark on the community. It forced many to confront the dangers of domestic violence and the devastating consequences when warning signs are ignored or minimized. Darion's story became part of a larger conversation about protecting women, supporting those trapped in cycles of abuse, and holding perpetrators fully accountable. On April 19, 2023, family and friends gathered to honor Darion at her funeral services. The ceremony was held at Edgefield Town Gym in South Carolina, followed by her burial at Sunset Gardens Memorial Cemetery in Johnston. The day was a painful farewell, but also a testament to the love that surrounded her. Even in her absence, her memory brought people together, united in mourning, but also in the determination to keep her legacy alive. Darion's story is a tragic reminder of how quickly love can turn into violence and how lives filled with hope can be destroyed in an instant. It shows the urgent need to break the silence around domestic abuse and to protect those most vulnerable. Her life, though cut short, continues to echo as a warning, but also as a call for change. For those who knew her, Darion will always be remembered as a daughter, a sister, and a soon-to-be mother who should have had the chance to raise her twin boys. For the world, her story stands as a heartbreaking example of betrayal, violence, and the cost of ignoring the signs that someone is in danger. This is the life and death of Darion Burley, a young woman who deserved so much more and whose story must never be forgotten. What do you think about this case? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true crime stories.